Material for the brain. Conversations for thinking bodies. Hello and welcome to Material for the Brain podcast. This is our third episode, and today I'm going to be doing a different format, so I don't have a guest, and I'm going to be sharing some thoughts with you, some ideas about the topic of different ways of learning. And as you might know, I've decided to initiate this podcast in order to explore the question of how can we cultivate a meaningful relationship with the body. And in the heart of this question, there is one thing that I think that is really important to cultivate. And this is a situation where we engage in learning and studying the body. And I will differentiate it from training. So repeating things that we know and working on things that we want to improve is different than learning something new. And one thing that I think that is important to recognize is that when we decide to learn, when we take the decision to learn something, so of course we are focusing on what do we want to learn. So I don't know, I'm attracted to studying that kind of sport, or maybe this type of activity, doesn't really matter. But very often we don't really think about how do we actually learn. And there's many ways of learning, and each way offers different advantages and different challenges. And that's the topic I want to dive into today. But before we start, I just want to share a short disclaimer. I'm going to present the information in a non-hierarchical way, and there is a reason for that. Not because I don't think that it's important to develop some individual hierarchies regarding the information, but because I'm always trying to reflect on how I cultivate ideological thinking. And the reason I'm interested in reflecting on it, because I don't think that it really serves us. It's a little bit inevitable that we will develop some dogmas, that we will have some preferences because of our needs and whatever makes us feel safe. But I'm always trying to look from the bird's eye and recognize, okay, what are the which areas in my practice has been crystallized and they are becoming static and they don't serve me anymore. So all the information that I will present today, again, like I will try to share it in a way that doesn't. I'm not going to try to tell you what I think is the best, because I think it's really up to you to implement it and to explore it and to look at it more as an ingredients that you can cook your own dish rather than a recipe for something specific. Okay, so let's start diving into the topic of ways of learning. And as a starting point, I wanted to present the three different ways that we can consume information. Like what happens on the actual level when I'm in a situation, I have a teacher, I came to study something. What are the ways that information can be transmitted? And when I say information, we are talking now about physical information that is related to movement. So the first way we can transmit and receive information is by hearing words. So we hear someone telling us information and we translate the words into actions. And this is very common in the somatic world. Feldenkrais, Klein technique, to use audio as a way to transmit information. And there's a lot of advantages to that. First, when we use our ears to translate information into action, one thing that we can forget about is the eyes. So we can close the eyes. And when we close the eyes, we can amplify a little bit our ability to sense our body, to get into the level of sensations. And that's a very big advantage. Another big advantage is that we are free from having a fixed relationship with a certain direction in the room. So if I'm only using my ears, it doesn't matter where I stand in the room in relationship to the teacher. I can keep learning. I don't need to constantly address the question of composition. And again, this can be very advantageous, that I don't need to be busy constantly. Where do I stand in the room? Can I see who is in front of me? Because we can hear in regard, like it's much easier to hear the information than to watch when it comes to where I'm placing myself in the room. And the second way is using our eyes. So to look at somebody doing something and carefully analyzing with the eyes what they are doing and translating it into our own bodies. And this is something that is, I would say that's the most common way that we learn. It's also relates a lot to how we learn movement when we are born. So we are born, and at a certain point we start looking around us. We are curious to watch, and we do get some examples from the environment of what can we aspire to become. So we see people walking, people doing different things, and then our eyes serves us to a certain degree with having this this clear image of where should we develop into, or what is the direction that I'm going. And it's also very common ways of learning in the dance world where I grew up, where I did the most amount of training. So a lot of time in dance, we watch the teacher, we see what they're doing, and we are trying to copy it. And I would say that this is a very, very, very useful skill to have, to be able to look at movement and to translate it into physical actions. And I can share with you one example of something that happened to me 1 year after we moved to Austria. I think it was in 2011. Our landlady took my wife and me to go to ski for the first time. And I've never skied before. I was born in Israel, not a lot of snow there. And I remember that when I came to the ski resort, I put the ski shoes and the skis, and in the first moment I couldn't even take one step. I tried to step up and I would immediately slide down, and I was a little bit frustrated. And then my wife showed me, because she had previous experience with skiing, she showed me how to walk laterally in order to climb a little bit the mountain. And then there was an area there for beginners, so I slide a few meters down, and I recognized that because I couldn't know how to stop myself, of course, there was a lot of fear and hesitation. So I started to watch people and to see how they stop themselves. And I watched carefully, and I recognized, okay, there is a certain movement in the hip, a lateral movement in the hip that enables you to shift the weight, distribute the weight differently, and like this you can break. And then I just went to a very mild slope and started to practice what I've watched, what I've seen with the eyes. And after 3 attempts, I've managed to stop, and that's it. I overcame this fear, and by the end of the day, I could ski pretty freely. Of course, still very beginner step, but I didn't have the fear anymore. I felt, okay, I have enough confidence to stop and to control the situation. And another obvious advantage of the ability to learn with the eyes is that you don't always have to be in a formal situation where somebody declares themselves as a teacher, like what happened to me. I just looked at random people that have more experience than me, and without them knowing, they were my teachers in this situation. And this is very, very useful. And the third way of learning movement is learning with the skin, so sensing. And this could be I'm touching something or someone touches me. And it's very present in partner work, in disciplines that involve a lot of partnering, for example, in contact improvisation or wrestling, where we are really dependent on the ability to feel the partner. That's what enables us to progress. But it's also very useful in other situations. For example, sometimes the sense of touch can help us with proprioception. Proprioception is our ability to sense where we are in space. So, for example, if I would like to differentiate, let's say, between open kinetic chain and closed kinetic chain in the shoulder movement, sometimes it's hard to do it while you're standing in an empty space. But if you just stand next to a wall and make sure that your shoulder is touching the wall, suddenly you have a tactile indication of where you are in the space. And this can really help you to increase the awareness and overcome the initial challenge of this kind of coordination riddle. And again, these three ways, hearing information, watching with the eyes, or sensing with the skin, there is no hierarchy. Certain people have easier time with different one of those ways. I remember when I'm teaching, I'm talking a lot as a teacher. I'm also demonstrating and I'm also touching my students, but I talk a lot. And I remember that I was explaining a certain movement sequence, and while I was explaining it, I kept verbalizing the direction. Shift the weight to the right leg, turn towards the left, send your arms away from the direction you're turning. And I remember that one student, she just got completely lost. It was just so confusing for her to hear those words that she just had to stop listening and just watch, ignore the words I'm saying, and just to use the eyes. And to a certain degree, it's very important that we will have the ability to understand what helps us learning. So when you come as a student and you have no idea what is good, which ways are more efficient for you, so you cannot communicate your needs clearly to the teacher. And being a student doesn't mean withdrawing from responsibility. There is a certain, let's say, established social expectation that when you enter the role of being a student, you are, let's say, inferior to your teacher when it comes to the respected information or whatever you are dealing with. And this hierarchy sometimes tends to affect us on the level of engagement and responsibility. But I think that being a student doesn't mean that you need to have less responsibility than your teacher. On the contrary, the more responsibility you take, the better student you become, and you can also help the teacher, because learning and teaching is an exchange. It's not a one-way street. So there is a dependency. The student cannot learn without the teacher, and the teacher cannot be a teacher without a student. So there is a dependency. So expanding our responsibility over the experience is very helpful. And to be able to verbalize to your teacher what is missing for you in the moment is very crucial. And of course, certain teachers and also certain disciplines are more dependent on certain ways of transmitting information. And sometimes you might ask your teacher if they can show you what to do, and maybe they will not be able to show you, especially if we look at professional sports, coaches who are coaching athletes that are doing very high level competitive sports. So maybe the coach is too old to even attempt doing what the student is doing. What comes in mind for me is like gymnastic coaches. They are working with athletes that perform the most difficult movement possible to imagine. And most of them probably cannot do anymore the movement. So they cannot really work so much with showing. Maybe they can show intentions, they can kind of mimic the ideas, but they cannot give an example of what their athletes are trying to perform. And in certain disciplines, verbalizing everything that you're doing could be very difficult. For example, if I'm going to teach now a very complicated dance phrase where there is a lot of details, if I will try to verbalize everything that I'm doing, the amount of words that I will have to express will be so much that it probably will be counterproductive. And to a certain degree, it's unavoidable to share some of the information just by demonstrating. And with the sense of touch, now that we are all going through the corona crisis, so many of us are studying online, and then of course touch is out of the question. Your teacher cannot touch you because you're not in the same room, although you can always touch yourself or use an object, which is also very useful. But this is something that when I started to understand it for myself, it really helped me to be able to communicate my needs better to my teachers, and sometimes to clearly ask, hey, could you please put your hands on my body, or do you mind to do the exercise with me that I can feel it, or could you please instead of just showing, also tell what are you doing, because it really helps me to hear the information. And of course, you always have to maintain a certain humility when you're in the student role, and some teachers would not be able to provide what you need, but that doesn't mean that you cannot learn. Now, another big aspect of the question of how to learn is also what kind of a setup you find yourself in. And what do I mean by that is that are you in an environment where you are studying something very specifically, or are you in an environment where you have a lot of freedom to explore? And both setups are very useful. And there is a certain tendency, I would say, to prioritize isolated situation than very open situation when it comes to learning. But I would say that both are very useful. And maybe I'll give some example that it can be a bit more clear. So let's look, for example, at contact improvisation, which is a discipline, which is a form of partner dance that involve touch. And there is a big culture within the contact improvisation community to use jamming, to cultivate spaces where people simply jam with each other. There's no teachers, nobody is teaching anything in the space, but it doesn't mean that there's no learning happening. And a different situation will be, of course, two people going to the room. One is a teacher and he is working on very isolated skills of partnering that can be found in contact improvisation. And of course, in one situation, you can much more clearly identify what is the learning that is taking place, because you can verbalize the information. You can even maybe give a name to the exercise. You could repeat it and reproduce it if you want to. And for sure, there is a very clear learning that is taking place. But there is a different type of learning when you enter a space where you have to really take much more responsibility about what are you actually doing. And that's the beauty of learning by jamming. First is the acknowledgement that even if you are not in a situation where a teacher is in front of you, you're still a student. Because no matter what are you interested in, there is an endless depth that you can dive into within this within the activity that you are engaged in. So it doesn't matter if I'm a black belt in Kung Fu. When I practice Kung Fu, I can still learn more and more. So taking the decision to go into a setup which is not it is not defined as learning can give you a reflection about how do you perceive yourself and how much are you still open for learning. And if you recognize within yourself that every time you're going to a contact jam, you come and you know what you're going to do, so it means that you lost a bit the connection to curiosity, to really maintain the relationship with the student that is inside of you. And I think that that's one very useful thing about open situations, that it's not only the learning that can happen there, but it's also the reflection on what is our relationship with the student character that is inside of us. Are we happy to meet the student, or we want always to be in the place that already knows? And this is an interesting point for me. And another thing that is also very interesting in comparison, in this comparison between very let's say fixed setups and open setups is coincidence. When you decide to go to a class and you know what is the topic of the class, let's say there is a certain realm of possibilities that you can expect to encounter. But when you go to an open learning frame, you might learn something that you were really not expected to learn, and it can be on very different levels. And when I say different levels, I'm going to open up another big chapter here, is what are you actually learning? Because the more I live my life and the more I engage with physical training, the more I recognize that the most meaningful learning for me is not only the physical layers, but it's again the reflection on my life, the reflection on my habits, the reflection on my vulnerabilities, on my strength. And the body is merely a mirror for that. And recognizing it, of course, gives you all another perspective on why do you actually want to learn what you want to learn. And of course, there is, let's say, I think there is a certain, let's say, paradigm that many people go through, that when you're younger, you're more connected to ambition. And again, I'm generalizing here, so if you're not falling into this categorization, so of course it's just my perception. Doesn't mean anything more than that. But it's what I've recognized by looking at people and also reflecting on my own behavior. So when we are younger, we are more connected to ambition. We want to achieve things. We want to define. We are more defined by our activity. And the older we get, the importance of the actual activity become less and less the driving force to maintain a relationship with whatever we are engaging with. And we start to draw this connection, and we are looking for meaning in somewhere else. So becoming the best dancer or becoming the champion or becoming the first person to do something is less and less the driving force. And then we can open a very, very wide space for learning, which is way beyond actually taking physical information and applying it in movement, which is maybe the first step into building a relationship with your body. Another point of view that is interesting to look at when it comes to learning is how many people there are around me and what is my relationship with the people around me. So first, we can start with solo learning. So I'm learning things for myself. I'm learning how to move my own body. I'm learning how to understand myself on many different levels, to cultivate awareness to many different things. And I would say that to a certain degree, this is something that I would say it's not possible to really develop a meaningful relationship with the body without exploring your body as a solo entity. And again, it can be with a person, with a one-on-one, with like a one-on-one class. It can be with a private class. It can also be in a group setup. It can also be studying something from a book at home. But I think that we have to visit the solo body, because eventually, no matter how much I'm interested in exchanging with other people, the one thing that I always bring with myself is myself. I cannot not carrying myself. Or maybe you can, but you can be somewhere else, maybe in your mind, but you still bring your body. And I think that it's really important to develop the ability to learn yourself, to learn your own body. Now, when you decide to study something for yourself, again, it will be very different if you do it at home while you buy a book about certain topic and you read the information and then you're trying to study for yourself, or where you choose to invite another friend and you both read the same book and you both at the same time trying to study something about your own bodies, or that you go to a group class and there the teacher will tell you some information and you will have to study your body, because all these different setups will confront you with different things. So I know that for certain people, being alone at home and choosing to actively engage with difficult things could be tremendously challenging, just because they really need this external support that, okay, there's more people around me that are going through this challenging, let's say, task, and I'm not alone. And for other people, this group pressure is paralyzing, and they need the privacy and their own timing and to take the decisions for themselves. And this is really important to recognize those differences. So learning solo material, learning about your own body, doesn't need to happen, let's say, solo, but it can happen solo. And this is interesting factors to start to recognize. Okay, whenever I am training and I'm studying something new for myself, where do I feel comfortable? Do I feel comfortable to be with others, or do I feel more comfortable to be alone? Do I need to have one person watching me, or do I want to have that the person who is watching me is my teacher, so that there is also somebody who is clearly feedbacking me, or do I just need a friend next to me? And this would really help because whenever we are learning, we have to come out of our comfort zone, because again, we have to step into something that we don't know. So it means we will need to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is something that every person has to negotiate for themselves. When do I feel comfortable to express vulnerability? Because if you don't express vulnerability, you're not learning. You're still where you feel comfortable, where you feel safe, and there is no learning when you're completely safe. So there has to be, it doesn't mean, when I mean there is no learning, it doesn't mean that when you want to learn, you have to put yourself in an extremely challenging situation. It can be that let's say you just stepped 1% out of your comfort zone, and that would be enough. Maybe that's the pace that you need to work with yourself. But again, there has to be certain percentage of vulnerability that you feel comfortable to express. And again, and that's something that you have to ask yourself, when do you feel comfortable expressing your vulnerability? Now, the second thing that I think that is really interesting to explore is partner work. To say, okay, I want to go into a learning experience and learn material that I will be in a relationship with another body. And this will be a completely different way of learning, because the main difference, or the most crucial difference, when you study your solo body or when you study with a partner, is that there is something that is really out of your control. When you're studying solo material, like many changing variables you can eliminate by creating situations that you really know what you're going through. So, like first, the relationship with the physical world is quite expected. You know how gravity, in which direction gravity will pull you. You, to a certain degree, know the limitation of your own body. So you're already you've eliminated a lot of unknown parameters. But when you're working with a partner, there is another consciousness next to you, and you cannot control the other consciousness. And you can try, but it's not going to be really productive. So studying your body with a partner is already diving into a certain foundational connection to life. That life you cannot control life. So you study your body, you place yourself next to another partner, and you're already getting in touch with that. I have to negotiate my needs. I have to negotiate my boundaries. I have to negotiate my wishes with another body, and that's it opens a completely different realm of learning. And of course, also here, the different practical setup will make a huge difference. So I really enjoy having fixed partner, but also I really enjoy having random partners. And this exposes me to completely different challenges and different advantages. So having a fixed partner, of course, you start building a certain relationship with somebody. So you start not only recognizing your own limitation and your own strength, but you also start to recognize it with another person. So again, you're starting to eliminate some of the unknown parameters, and by eliminating them, you maybe will be able to express more vulnerability. So it's a little bit easier. I will just give an example, maybe. So I'm very interested in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and whenever I go to a class, or especially if I'm traveling and then I go to a new gym where I don't know anybody, so of course there is a certain risk involved in playing jiu-jitsu. You might, if you're sparring with a partner that you don't know, who cannot control their body movement, you might get injured. So of course, when I go to a new gym and I don't have a clue who is the person I'm training with, so then I'm not gonna enter a very vulnerable space, I'm going to first try to make sure that I'm safe. So there will be a little bit less learning taking place. But if I have a fixed partner where I'm already training for years and I really know that I can trust them, so then I don't mind to try a lot of things that are completely out of my comfort zone and say, okay, let's be vulnerable. Let's see what's going on here. And again, that's something that you have to experiment with. And of course, to a certain degree, it's more challenging to have a fixed partner because it demands commitment, and commitment is it's always something we need to invest, and not everybody is willing to, or not everybody has the privilege to have the amount of time and capacity and space in their life to cultivate a training relationship. You know, everyone has many relationships in their life, and one relationship that you can develop is a training relationship with somebody. And the last layer is group practices. And I would say that group practices are not very common. In most sports, no, maybe I'm exaggerating. Actually, there's a lot of group sports like football, basketball, like team sports that you will encounter collaborating with more than one person. But when I think about what comes in one mind when I think about studying the body, so when people go to play football, they don't think about, oh, I'm going to go and explore and study my body. They go to play football. And maybe that's why I would say that there is less emphasis on learning how to recognize what is happening in your body while you are also engaged in a group practice. And that's what I meant by that it's not very common. So of course, yes, there's a lot of activities that demands more than one person, more than one partner, but creating situation where you can actually be engaged in studying your body while there is an activity that involves many people, that's not very common. And of course, if you have this perception, maybe you can also apply it to going and playing football. And what I mean by this, and this is something that I experienced mainly around the world of dance, and a lot in the context of dance improvisation, contact improvisation, compositional work, and sometimes even in choreography work. And I would say like that, what is happening when we start to engage studying our own body while we are in relationship to more than one person is, first, again, like we are in the realm of chaos. So, okay, to a certain degree, one person offers a challenges, but we can recognize them relatively quickly, and the amount of coincidence that will take place will become manageable. But when you're starting to do things with 4, 5, 6, 7 people, there is really too much options to actually map the possibilities and find solutions and create strategies, because there's just too much options. So the first thing that you're going to be confronted with is the need to really let go of control and acknowledge that coincidence is a vital part of learning, is a vital part of being, and it's really, really connected to life, that we exist within an environment where coincidence shifts our experience on a daily level. And it's just a question of acknowledging it and seeing it happening around us. And when I think about what is happening to me when I go and I study movement and I place myself within a group, is to start recognizing the potential roles that I can play within a group setup, and starting to recognize, where do I feel comfortable within a group? Do I feel comfortable leading? Do I feel comfortable following? Do I need to be somewhere in the middle? maybe I can change. Maybe sometimes I can lead and sometimes I can follow, and I have easy time to switch the roles. And again, and this is something that I think any group setup to a certain degree will slowly start to reflect. You will have some reflection, and to that, and in this kind of sphere, I would say that even going and playing football with your friends on a Saturday afternoon, you will have some reflection on that, because every group practice demands certain cooperation, and when people need to cooperate, they are building relationship, they are building hierarchies, people take different roles, and then if you're open for that, to observe it, so then well man, then you're learning so much about yourself, which again is really connected for me, that the engaging with physical practices offers a certain reflection that is beyond the physical activity that we are engaging. Okay, and maybe the last realm that I wanted to talk about is a little bit on like our situation, and like learning offline and learning online, and what are those, what is the differences, and what do I think about it. So first I think it's not new, but Corona really amplified the differences of what is happening when I'm when I'm studying at home, and what is happening when I actually go somewhere and I meet people in the same space. And I think the first thing that I would like to point out, that is maybe not that it's not very common maybe to think about it, but whenever you go to learn and you need to go out of your house, so again, there is a certain investment that you're doing, like a certain effort that you take upon yourself, that maybe it's very minimal, but still, you go out of your house, you dress up, you prepare your bag, you plan the proper departure time, that you come on time. There is a certain ceremony, and I think that ceremonies are part of life, and for many people, ceremonies are very helpful part of preparing on the mental level to learning. So by doing this ceremony, and it can be on many different levels, it can be on the types of clothes that I'm gonna wear, or how do I like to travel when I go. For example, me, I really enjoy taking my surf skate, and then I know while I'm going to the training to take a class, I'm already gonna move my body with my surf skate, and then I have this kind of way of awakening my body prior to the class, which I find beneficial for me. So there is a certain ceremony. And when you're at home, most of the time the transition is so abrupt that no wonder that it's much more challenging to actually focus. So it's like, okay, let's say now I'm teaching, at the moment I'm offering the professional dance training for Tanzquartier in Vienna, and the classes are taking place online, and it's every Friday. And then the transition for me as a teacher, and also I don't know what is happening on the student, but I'm going to share from my perspective. So I'm here at home with my kids and with my wife, and like I really need to organize a lot of things, and then the transition is happening within 5 minutes. So 5 minutes, okay, everybody clear the living room, and now I'm in my teacher role. And I didn't have the time of traveling in the underground and thinking about what I'm gonna do, and kind of going through this phase of transition. And I think transitions are extremely important when it comes to cultivating the ability to learn. So if you're studying online, and I don't know, when you know that at 10 in the morning the class starts, and then at 5 to 10 you're still I don't know, washing dishes, and then you just appear in the class, you had zero transition time. So it's really so sharp that, of course, it will be very, very challenging to really cultivate a quality mindset for learning. So that's one big difference between offline and online. The second big difference is, of course, the space architecture. And like me, it's very important for me that my life will invite movement. So it's reflected in the interior design of our apartment. We have a lot of floor space. All the furnitures are in the margins. You can move them easily to clear more space. And I feel very privileged to being able to live like this, because it's very useful. And that's something that is already very important to think of. So if you want to be able to learn, let's say online, and if it's important for you that you are not dependent on classes taking place and this availability, this external availability, it's really, really good to organize your house in a way that can accommodate this need. And that's, again, would be extremely important in order that you will be able to learn. Another major difference, I think, is the level of like how other people affect you. So if I compare the situation where I go to a studio to take a class, or when I join a Zoom class. So at Zoom, the other people are almost non-existing for you. You can focus on the teacher and you can completely forget that there are other people doing the same practice with you. While when you're in the studio, if you're 3 people or 20 people, you cannot ignore that fact. And again, there is an advantage and disadvantages to that, because if you come to a class and let's say 25 people are coming and the room is not that big, so suddenly it's not very comfortable to be in a physical class, let's call it offline class, because the space is limited and maybe you feel a bit claustrophobic, and at home, again, you know what's going to happen. So you eliminated this, you've eliminated one parameter that can extremely change your experience. And to a certain degree, again, it enables you to be more vulnerable, because that's the question at the end, how much vulnerability you can express in order to really learn something new. So that's something that the online environment is much more supportive, because it's expected. Again, you're not going to be surprised by that. And beside the fact of how many people are coming, of course, it's also the social interaction that is taking place. One thing that is happening all the time when we are learning and there's other people in the room is that we also, to a certain degree, tend to look what people are doing. Okay, how do people are managing the information in comparison to how do I manage the information? So when you go to a live class, you might be much more busy with what other people are doing instead of focusing what are you doing. And that's a certain tendency, and that's a certain thing that, again, I think that it's mainly it's really inhibiting our ability to learn. And in the last episode with Deborah, she talked a lot about comparison, comparing ourselves. And I think it's not something that helps us very much. And again, when you're taking a class, online class, you're free from that, because you don't really see what other people are doing. And that's, again, another great advantage of taking classes online in comparison to take classes offline. But the social interaction can also be something positive, again, because it's part of this, what I've said, this kind of transition, the ceremony. Okay, you come to the room, you see people you know, makes you happy. Hi, hello, how are you? Like like you interact with your friends, you already feel safe. Yeah, I'm in a place where I feel welcomed, and there is people I like. It already calms you down, and again, it will translate to your ability to be more vulnerable. So again, it's a negotiation. There is advantages, there is disadvantages. And also around the idea of studying online, there is two distinct situations that we didn't talk about. But when you're studying material online, you can study live classes, but you can also study recorded classes. And this is something, again, it's a very, very different space you're entering. So when you go to a, let's say, physical class, it's always live. Nobody will place a video recording and tell you, okay, welcome to my class, play. So, but you can do it for yourself. Me personally, I've studied a lot of movement material by watching videos. I did it especially around Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where I bought some DVDs and studied with another partner, but also with other movement. And this is a big difference, because when you're going to a live class, of course, you have the advantage of the teacher is there. You can ask a question. There is a certain guidance that you're going through. So the teacher is planning certain pathway, or maybe is improvising a certain pathway that you're all going through. And when you're watching a pre-recorded class, you can always stop. You can jump forward. You can jump backward. You are choreographing the path of the class. So that's also a very, very different learning setup that has advantages and disadvantages. The ability to pause, take your own time, embody something, and then repeat it again is a very great tool that you can use. Yeah, so we've covered many things today about ways of learning, and from how we actually consume information to the different type of relationship that we will cultivate with people, with technology, and again, I think that what I'm trying to do with myself is to try to juggle between those different parameters, and to recognize that one thing that will indicate my ability to progress in whatever I want to progress is also my ability to study and learn in different situations with different parameters. So if I really want to, let's take a very practical example. I don't know, if I really want to be able to study how to stand on my hands, it will be very useful to go through different experiences. So maybe one time I'm gonna go for a group class about handstand, and I'm gonna be in a room with a teacher, with many people who are practicing together handstand. And maybe the next day I will invite a friend and we will just do together a handstand session. And maybe afterwards I'm gonna buy a DVD about handstands, and I'm gonna study it for myself. And then afterwards I'm gonna go to online class about handstand. And then again, I'm going to come back to the same teacher, and I'm going to take a private class with them that they can give me feedback individually. And then I'm going to do a session that I'm just training with myself and studying with myself without any DVD teacher, just self-study. And then all these different ways will help me to learn different things that will help me to understand things from different perspectives. And again, it might not be, let's say, the quickest way to the target if your only ambition is to be able to stand on your hands. But if you put that aside for a moment, I think you would learn much more things by having by enabling yourself to dive into very different types of experiences. And this is something that I think it's worth thinking about, how different learning experiences can offer you different perspectives about whatever you want to learn. Yes, so that's it, folks. That's, I think, quite a lot of things that we've covered today. And maybe it's time for two announcements that I wanted to share with you today, which relates to my teaching practice and certain things that I've started to offer. So the first thing is that I've opened a personal coaching program, which I've started it 2 months ago. And initially I didn't really publish it anywhere yet. So I was just spreading the words within my student community here in Vienna, where several students have decided to already start studying with me in this program. And this program is designed to answer three things. So what is your individual goals and wishes? What are the things that are really holding you back from achieving those goals? And what do I think would be the most creative and appropriate way of handling those two things? And in this program, I invite people who are interested in studying with me to come first for a meeting where we get to learn it, get to know each other, and see if we can actually dive together into this journey. And when we both agree, then I'm gonna, together with you, help you to build a training program that you will follow up for 4 weeks, and we're gonna meet for a live Zoom class, so online class live, where I'm gonna be showing you all the material that you're gonna be studying. So you will have already, if we talk about ways of learning, you will have a situation where you're studying together with a teacher live, one-on-one class online. And then you will have 4 weeks where you would study with yourself, solo practice. And the last component is that throughout the 4 weeks that we are running each training program, you will be able to share videos with me and receive feedback. So you will also be able to learn through watching yourself and reading information from the outside. And so this is one thing, my personal coaching platform, where at the moment I would say it's the first time I'm announcing it publicly. So I would have the capacity to accept, I would say, up to 3 more students if I would want to maintain the quality of what I'm doing, because it's also something that I'm also in a learning phase of how to do it efficiently. So it takes more time. So, and I wouldn't want to compromise the quality of the work I can offer to people. So if you're interested, of course, you can go to my website and go into the personal coaching area and send me a message to there. There's a form you can fill. And the second thing is that I've started to create online library where I call it Material for the Body. So Material for the Brain is the podcast, and Material for the Body is this online library of courses that you can purchase and study by yourself. And it's pre-recorded courses. And again, very different way of learning. So working with information that is pre-recorded. And each course is focusing on a different topic. And now there is already available on my website the first course I've released, which is How to Fall Safely. And this course is comprised by 2 volumes, Fundamental and Advanced. And the idea of the course is to take you through a journey that you will tackle the topic of falling. So starting from very fundamental and basic exercises of understanding first, what is the governing principle for falling? So what do we actually need to do in order to fall safely, which is a principle that governs all the falling techniques. And then starting to look at very specific ways of falling, from a basic thing like forward roll and backward roll into more complicated materials. And this is the fundamental course, and the advanced course is really starting to taking falling into a more creative practice. So how can I look at falling as something that is not only practical and that is there to help me to maintain my integrity and my safety, but is also something that can be incorporated playfully and creatively, and to challenge myself also on like motor skill and other variables. So, and this is also something that is relatively new. Again, I've only published it recently with my students and did some announcement on social media, but now it's finally available on my website under online courses. So you're welcome to check it out. And I'm also gonna, if you're interested, you can also email me, and I'm gonna share with you a discount coupon for the people who are listening to the podcast. So if you're interested in purchasing one of the offline courses, again, you're welcome to email me and tell me that what you're interested in, and I'm gonna send you a discount coupon only for you, the podcast listener. And that is it. Next week, I'm recording the 4th episode, which will be with a very, very interesting cognitive neuroscientist who is also a karate black belt and other things. So keep yourself informed, and yeah, it's I'm gonna keep hopefully delivering you interesting content, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. And of course, I'm very, very open and curious at this phase to hear your feedback. So if you have topics you want me to cover, or questions, or you have some people that you really think that you would be happy to hear me converse with, so you can write me recommendation for people that you think that will be suiting the podcast, and any other feedback that you have, I'm very open and happy to hear. So that's it. Have a wonderful day, and until the next episode. For more movement-related content and educational training programs, visit our website at www.movementlab.eu.